Now I'm delighted to introduce Mona Chiriac, who is our speaker for this session. Mona is graduated in Geography and English Language and Literature in Iași, Romania, and has a master's in Leading, Teaching and Learning from the University of Cambridge at the Faculty of Education. She's been involved in teacher training and professional development for over 12 years and is currently pursuing her PhD studies and is researching geographies of education, taking a keen interest on how education differs in the world, both in terms of curriculum content and teaching and learning strategies being used. Since 2015, Mona has been working as a teacher trainer for Cambridge Assessment International Education, has trained teachers in global perspectives, active learning methodology, and assessment for learning in humanities and social sciences around the world. So Mona's workshop today will explore the typical characteristics of educating adolescents and will reflect on whether we know enough about unique features of the teenage brain development. She'll take a look at the Cambridge Lower Secondary Global Perspectives curriculum, which pays attention to learners' educational needs by connecting them to the current themes of today and tomorrow. Without further ado, I'm delighted to pass the word on to Mona and to do it for her workshop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Josephine, and thank you very much to the entire Cambridge team in Italy for allowing this event to happen. Thank you very much for all the participants who have enrolled today in our workshop, and I'm hoping that it will be a productive workshop for you and one that will allow some learning, a little bit more extra than what you came here today at. So hopefully by the end of today, you will have known a little bit more about not only the teenage brain and the unique features of the teenage brain, but also about how that fits with the Cambridge approach and how Cambridge is taking into consideration the unique features of the teenage brain. My workshop today is therefore going to look into the Cambridge approach to education, and then we're going to look a little bit, we don't have enough time, into the characteristics of the teenage brain, so of the humans, but at that particular time in their development. And then we're going to focus on the global perspectives curriculum, and we're going to look at the syllabus, we're going to look at the content of the teaching and learning specific strategies, and equally at the assessment methods. So to start off, I think it is very important that you also know and you also communicate with us why you've decided to attend our workshop. And this is very important for us because ultimately I know what I have to say, but I need to guide my speech so that I answer your questions as well. So please go into, and you should have in the chat, as Josephine has kindly put in there, just go to menti.com and introduce that code. You do not require a login, you don't require a password. All you have to do is put in there. And if that doesn't work for you, equally, you can write in the chat and let us know why you've decided to attend this workshop. And based on this, of course, we will look into how I can then tailor my speech so that I also answer your questions. So if we look now at the why did you attend this workshop? Okay. Let's see if we have, okay, thank you very much. Some of you have already managed to log in. Okay, let's see. So curious about global perspective. Okay, you have two choices there, so you can go and click on two. Interested in teaching global perspective. That's very, very good to network as well. Oh, thank you, Gladys. The title made you curious. Yes. Well, the title may have put some people off thinking, what is this about? But I'm glad it caught your attention. Curious about global perspective and to try and learn something new. Interested in this topic, says Daniela, thank you. We will address also how do I believe that lower secondary school, they're the learners that are somehow caught in the middle. Oh, Maria Luisa, I have an 11-year-old as well. I think I kind of still get her, but sometimes she speaks a language with her cousins or her friends that I definitely don't understand. Yes, to help our learners, to help our learners. Thank you, Alexandra. I knew I recognized your name. You went to our session yesterday. You wanted to know more about it. Hopefully I will give you more, but some of it will be the basics of the curriculum. And yes, your students usually sometimes may fit this age group, and you might be interested into how to teach them better. And I'm hoping to develop that a little bit more. So thank you very much for this. You can also continue to add some of these. And what we will do is at the end, we will have a general idea about what guided you to coming to our session. So let's continue with our workshop. Now that I know you're very curious in global perspective, and you're also very curious in finding something new. So with this in mind, let's start a little bit with the Cambridge pathway and what Cambridge offers. It is very well established, and it offers curriculum for students aged 5 all the way to 19 in different sectors, as you see there. We today are going to look in particular at the lower secondary one. You see this green here. So students aged 11 to 14. And as you can see here, we offer English, mathematics, science, ICT. We offer global perspectives, and I'd like you to kind of look and follow that global perspectives is a thread that runs from primary all the way into lower secondary, upper secondary, and the A-level. So there is continuity in the services that we provide in terms of global perspective. But apart from these here, as you can see, there's also music, there's also art and design, there's also physical education, there's digital literacy. So all of this is something that we offer to students of lower secondary age. In trying to understand our programs, as I've also mentioned yesterday, it is very important to understand what we stand for in education. What does Cambridge and the Cambridge approach to education stand for? And ultimately, and this is also my PhD thesis, is looking into what kind of graduates do we want to have at the end of their education. Therefore, we need to look to see if this is the kind of learner we want. So how do we make that happen through our curricula, and how do we make it happen through our pedagogy, through our teaching and learning strategies? So if we look at the Cambridge educational approach, Cambridge is very interested in creating confident learners, learners who are knowledgeable, and this knowledge creates this confidence in allowing them to filter the information, in allowing them to have an opinion, in equipping them with the tools so that they can say their opinion, they can filter the maze of information that comes their way nowadays, and they can be smart consumers of information. Cambridge also wants to have responsible learners, learners who are self-directed in their learning, who are motivated. Therefore, our programs look at trying to find the self-motivation and capitalize on it. We're looking at having innovative learners, and I'm going to tap on this one today because it's a basic characteristic of the teenage brain. So we're looking to have innovative learners who think about solutions, and they just take things in and that's it. They're not just barrels in which we just deposit knowledge. They have their own opinions, and they can create and they can innovate. They can come up with solutions, and global perspective is the curriculum that actually makes this happen in terms of trying to give opportunities to learners to have initiative and find solutions. We're also looking at engaged, therefore not passive receivers of information, but actively engaged and interested in their learning. And of course, reflective, because you can't really do much unless you reflect back on your own learning, on your own behavior, and how your own learning and behavior affects people around you and the impact that it has globally. So reflection, as you will see later on today, is very important, not just for the global perspective curriculum, but equally for the entire Cambridge approach to education. I assume you would not be surprised to find out that if these are the Cambridge learner attributes that we want in our learners, these are also the Cambridge teacher attributes. So this is what we also expect and we want to cultivate in teachers teaching the Cambridge curriculum. So having said that, and understanding that we want to develop these features in our students, how do we actually do this? And how does the teenage brain come into play here? And I think it's only fair to recognize that teenagers are at a crucial stage in their development. And therefore, there are typical changes that happen in this window of brain development. And I've put some of them there. And one of the first ones is novelty seeking. Nowhere in our lives are we more prone to look for novelty, to look for things that are different than in our teenage years. And that is because dopamine levels flood the brain in this window. And this is linked with our reward system. So in no other stage of our brain development are we more inclined to look for novelty, to take risks. And in no other stage of our brain development does this pay back more rewardingly. We feel more rewarded for doing that. Therefore, it is very important to capitalize on this because it leads to trying and it leads to experimenting new things, which therefore allows for ingenious ways of problem solving and finding solutions. I think what adults call, I'm going to move to sort of challenging the status quo. What sometimes adults dislike in teenagers is about, they call them troublemakers because they shake, they rattle the cage a little bit. But that's because they're creative. That's because they want to try new things. And adults get tired of these because they break the rules, they push the boundaries. But this is part of developing independence. And unless you rattle the cage, unless you look at things differently, we don't really develop as a society. So this is very important in acknowledging that the brain of the teenage person has these features. Therefore, teach with this in mind. There's a fantastic book called The Brain Targeted Teaching. And I think it offers a lot of information into how do we teach, bearing in mind these changes. But there are also a lot of other books. I'm not just recommending that one. And I also would like to say that with all of this in mind, teenagers are also prone to making very poor decisions. And that is because of two main reasons. First of all, the brain develops from inside outwards. Therefore, from the primeval brain, the basic needs of someone, all the way to the more complex and sophisticated needs. And at the same time as it does this, from inside out, it also develops from back to front. Therefore, it develops from emotions at the back to thinking, cognition, reasoning at the front. So the frontal development brain, it comes only with experience. So therefore, young people don't have this. They're still very much emotionally charged, and this creates impulsivity and it creates moodiness. And teenagers haven't got perspective. Because perspective comes with experience, and they don't have the experience. They haven't lived it to try and learn the lessons from it. I remember a workshop once, which was amazing. They made a comparison of a teenage brain with a Ferrari. I think it's a quite a good setting to mention this. And they said it's like having someone drive a Ferrari, an amazing brain that is quick, it's fast, it's impulsive, it's creative, it can do a lot of things, but they don't have a driving license. They don't know yet how to maneuver it. So they are bound to make poor decisions because they don't have this perspective. So research shows that teenage years nowadays last longer now than they used to in the past. And that's because maybe in the past, people were kind of like forced to mature quicker. They left their houses earlier. They found their jobs maybe earlier. They got married earlier. They had children earlier. So they kind of like included themselves into, they were forced to growing up. We say growing up a little bit earlier. So the whole idea is, and also we are social beings. I'm looking here at social engagement. Their friendships are very important. Together with this emotionally charged being, when a teenager argues with their friends, it's the end of the world because they don't have this perspective. So, and the social engagement is very important, because if all of this happens without an adult understanding this and trying to teach them in such a way that it takes into consideration and understands this, that it's not because they want to be moody, it's because they don't have a choice. My daughter sometimes comes to me and says, "Mommy, I'm crying and I don't know why." I get her, and all she needs is a hug. And I think it's important as teachers, we understand this about our learners. And this fits in because GP allows and actually creates the setting, a safe setting for them to explore their curiosity, for them to explore the solutions and the creative stage in which they are, and to form interests that are of global significance. So if I move into how does global perspective is actually teaching, I don't know how to look at the chat. How does global perspective actually teach, and what does it actually teach, and how does it help? Well, it is absolutely crucial that we understand this. Global perspective is not about global issues. Global perspectives, it is about teaching these 6 skills. As I'm a geographer by base and English language, but in geography, my curriculum is to teach volcanoes, earthquakes, rivers, to teach population development, to teach globalization. This is what I have to teach. Global perspective teaches research, analysis, evaluation, reflection, collaboration, and communication. And I will be talking to you a little bit next in the future, in the immediate future, how it does this. But in the meantime, I would like you to visualize your students, visualize those, 11 to 14-year-olds. And I'd like you to tell me, out of these 6, which 3 skills would you place at the top of your ranking? And you can do that either in the chat or using, again, the Mentimeter, as Josephine has kindly put there. Go back to Mentimeter and introduce the new code. Again, you don't need anything else, just introduce the new code. And we can then look at, what do you think? What do your learners, hello, Savannah, what do your learners need the most out of these skills? But it is important that you are with your learners in mind, because it's easier to just focus on them, to know exactly what you're looking for. So look particularly to your learners. Focus on a class, or focus on students that you can visualize them. And out of these 6 skills, and you have them here as well, which ones do you think are the most important? That is very interesting. That is very interesting. Collaboration, communication, and research, says Maria Luisa. Laura says analysis, reflection, and collaboration. Analysis, communication, and research, says Rita. Communication seems to be at the top. Communication and collaboration. It's so interesting that we usually take for granted, usually when sometimes communication also, says Maria and Federica, I think it's very important because we take communication for granted. Of course, students talk. Sometimes we don't get them to shut up. But global perspectives looks at how they communicate. And sometimes I wonder if we're not misguiding our students in understanding some of these skills. I know that I can put my hand up and say that in the past, I would tell my students in geography class to say, I don't know, we're investigating something, and let's say the eruption of Mount Etna, and I would go and I would tell them, go and research about it. Well, actually, I didn't really quite mean research. I think we don't communicate very well with our students ourselves, because research is a very strategic act. Research includes a lot of things. And what I was actually wanting my learners to do was literally go and collect some information. Don't do a research. Research and collecting information, they're two separate things. We're actually collecting information is part of research, but an entire research project is more than just collecting information. And I think we misguide them. And I think this is where global perspective comes in. Thank you very much. I can see a lot of communication and collaboration, but equally the other one. So what we will try and do today is actually unpick exactly some of these topics that we think we tell our students. So bear in mind this, and always try and remember that this is a paradigm shift. What we are interested in our learners is not the global issues, but is these 6 skills. So we're interested in teaching 6 skills, but explicitly teaching them. Teach them research, analysis, evaluation, reflection, collaboration, and communication. So next, how are we going to do that? How am I going to teach them research? I didn't graduate a university where they taught me how to teach this. Nobody has. Therefore, anybody can be a global perspective teacher, and usually they are English teachers, so from the languages, or humanities teachers. But anybody can be, for as long as you remember it's not a subject knowledge, it's a skills subject. Therefore, skills are very important. You're deliberately teaching them these skills. And in order to do this, you realize, therefore, that the content is very different. My geography content is about the human and the physical and environmental geography. But global perspectives, it's not about content. It's not, it's about skills. Therefore, the curriculum is different from that point of view. And this, of course, is hand in hand with how do I teach it, with the methods of teaching and learning. Therefore, these are going to be different. And equally, the assessment is going to be different, because I'm no longer assessing knowledge. I am assessing the skills that these students have acquired during my lesson. So in order to teach these, Cambridge has put together themes, topics. If I need to research, to teach a research or collaboration or evaluation, how am I going to do it? Well, I'm going to do it by teaching certain themes. Now, the knowledge in these themes are not deadly important, because I'm not going to evaluate on them, but I need some sort of a content, some sort of a vehicle to teach those skills. So these are the topics, and it is very important that they are of global importance. So it is about trade and aid, it is about families, it is about sustainability, and these are different. I think I want you to put this into context, because if you do choose global perspectives at primary, they will have learned the same 6 skills, but a much simpler manner. And then they move on to lower secondary, still the same 6 skills, but the topics are different. And then some of them are different. And then they move on to the IGCSE and A level, and there are different topics again, but the same 6 skills. So these are the topics, the vehicle, the means by which we teach these skills. And how do we do it? Well, this is the long-term planning. So this would be like, for example, for a whole term. And if we look here, the first question that we need to have in mind when teaching global perspectives, and we have a class, for example, of students who are aged 12, 14, and then we're going to have to look, okay, what am I teaching them? And you are interested, as I saw there. So the first question is about the skill. Which skill would my students benefit most from? And you said they would benefit most from communication. Okay, choose the communication then. And then this, what follows after, is a challenge. Cambridge has put together a challenge. I will show you how one looks like, which is exactly how to teach it, what activities, what resources you would need for yourselves and for your students. And when you finish with communication, you then start thinking and say, okay, so what else would they benefit from? They benefit from research. I have plenty here for stage 7 to choose from, because this is a research and this is another research. So these are all for stage 7. Now, it is advisable that you go along on the horizontal, because what one of these boxes is there are lessons, and you teach this particular skill for 6 lessons. So therefore, if it is a 1 lesson a week, you teach it for roughly half a term. And the challenge provides you step-by-step instructions on how to do this. And then when you finish this, you will see, well, we haven't finished with research, because I can find research here as well. And equally, I can find research as they grow older. Therefore, I'm starting off with small steps, and then I increase the level of difficulty in the research. So let's see how exactly am I increasing the level of difficulty when doing the research. Well, if we look at what the skill looks like, let's take, for example, the research. And today I focused on research. Yesterday I did focus on collaboration and communication. But if we look at research, it is important that I realize that this skill is broken down into sub-strands. So I have what? When I research, I need to learn how to construct a research question. Every good research starts with a research question. But we need to teach our learners. So it's about explicitly breaking down the concept of research to our students. So we break down and, okay, I need to teach them how to ask research questions. And then I need to also teach them how to identify sources, different types of sources, and then where to locate them in order to answer their research question. So it's more, as you will have seen, in primary, is basic, much basic than this. I mean, it's more complicated now. And then I need to teach them how to select appropriate methods to conduct their research. They've made a prediction, then to try and see how they can test their prediction in such a way so that they can answer their research question. And then they need to record their findings. So they need to select, organize, record from a range of sources, very important. How many times do students just hear something and they just take it for granted, they believe it? We teach them to be, as I said earlier, smart consumers of information. So look for a range of sources in trying to find out something about a topic and use the appropriate methods. So many times we've seen graphs that are like line graphs, when that's not the best way to represent that information. So this is the way in which we break down the research. But equally, every single one of these 6 skills is broken down into different substrands. And as I said earlier, they get more complicated the more we move from stage 7 to stage 9. So stages 7 and 8 are constructing research question, that is 1. But then here I want them a range of relevant questions and then identify the most appropriate one to follow up. So I'm getting with this skill progressively more difficult. The same with interpreting data. From stage 7 and 8, which are similar, and it allows the growth in that skill, to stage 9, the end of lower secondary, where it gets more complicated because you need to support an argument using and looking for patterns and trends in graphical and numerical data, for example, as this one is here. So these are ways in which our skills are broken down and get progressively more difficult as students advance from beginning of lower secondary to the end of lower secondary. And there's a wealth of resources that you can have if you teach this subject, because I can understand people may feel a little bit lost. I don't know, I've never taught collaboration, but need not worry, because there's a lot of information out there for you. If you look at lower secondary Cambridge International website, you can find in there a lot of resources, and I'll sort of take you through them. The curriculum framework gives you ideas about the skills and how they're broken down into sub-strands and how they get progressively more complicated. The teacher guide adds extra information. The teacher guide looks at and how is it exactly that you're going to teach it? So it looks at active learning methodologies, how you're going to evaluate it, and so on and so forth. Look, I'm hoping you can see the screen. So if I look at global perspectives for lower secondary, I can see here the curriculum framework. You click on it and you can download it. You can see the teacher guide that has the planning and how to create the environment and how to monitor your students' progress. And then you have the challenges and the resources. And if you look at the top here, they are so many ways in which you can filter them. So if you're teaching 11-year-olds, 11, 12-year-olds, you just click on this one and there's our challenges by stage. So stage 7 would be 11, 12 years old, and you have a lot of challenges here. And you have the challenge with learner support for students, and then you have teacher resources as well. And then if you say you click for a topic and you say, well, I'm interested in a topic, which technically speaking, you should be looking by skill first. But these are belief systems. These are changing communities, for example. But if you're looking by skills, and I would strongly advise, because otherwise you lose the focus. Remember, you're not teaching the topic, you're teaching the skill. But if you teach by skills, then you go and you think, okay, so what do I want to teach? I want to teach analysis. This is stage 7 analysis with a lot. This is stage 9 analysis. This is a new challenge in stage 8. Now, if I open one of them and see how it looks like, for example, global brands, when looking at this, it kind of looks like this, and it's a very important material to look at. So it tells me it is analysis. The main focus, usually it is 2, sometimes 3 that we're looking at, because you can't teach one skill in complete isolation from the other. Stage 7 means 11 to 12 years old, and the topic is globalization. These are the learning objectives, analysis, research, and evaluation, and inside them, you're looking at explaining causes of a local and global issue and consequences. So in analysis, what you're teaching your learners is cause and consequence. And this is the success criteria. This is how you know that they've achieved this. For research, I showed you earlier, it is teaching them how to construct relevant research questions and then evaluation. And if you scroll down, you will then see proposed activities. Nobody's forcing you to teach those, but there's a wealth of material of what you need to do. There's a teacher resource here about Dr. Martin Luther King's speech about where the resources are coming from. It's very interesting. I taught this one to my students. And then this means a personal view, and this line here means a global perspective. So you can look at one issue from your own personal thing. This is a local perspective, several groups, several people together. And then the globe is a global perspective on the issue. So it teaches from personal to local and to global interest. And then there's a lot of information here, for example, of how you can conduct this over these 6 lessons. And then you can also click on your resources and you can see what the resources are and how the resources help you. So for example, the teacher resource, they are Word documents, so you can change them, you can adjust them, but these resources are for Cambridge schools and they are free of charge for Cambridge schools. So this is the resources and the immense support that you are offered when teaching this. You also have a self-study training. In case you are lost and you don't know how to do it, there is a course that is online and it is again free of charge that guides you through the stages of how you plan for global perspective. There's samples of lesson plans. There's a lot out there for you. So content is different, as I've tried to show you. If content is different, automatically teaching and learning is very different, because I can't teach research traditionally, in a traditional way, nor can I teach collaboration and communication like this. And it is also very important to realize that you're teaching them from a personal, a local, or a national perspective, and the global one. So if we're looking personally at a topic, then it is important to see whether it has resonance in the outside world. because they do live in a global community, no longer enclosed into their own little communities. So I have chosen research today and analysis. I'm going to whiz through them because you will have these materials. But when teaching research, it is important that you take it strategically. It is important that you look at the learning objectives, and it is important that you look, how am I going to teach this particular skill? So research, what does it mean? Well, I need to get them to find some information. It's one of them, it's the information skill. How am I going to do this? Well, you need to set very clear steps of research. So at the beginning, you need to clarify what is it that they're looking for. And then they need to carry out the search. Then they need to look beyond the first results. They need to filter and evaluate. And then don't forget, they also need to reference all the time, even such a young learner. So it is very important that when they clarify, for example, a potential activity, because some of you said you wanted to find sort of teaching ideas, and an important way to do it is to actually start brainstorming when clarifying an issue. So for example, try and brainstorm around the keyword, try and get students to, let's say we're doing, I don't know, it was globalization there, or branding, or migration. Try and get them to think of alternative phrases, mind map, and get them all to collaborate and to see and clarify first what they're looking for. Otherwise, they tend to waste a lot of time just to, surfing the net, and that's not what we're looking for. Once this is done, and I think, for example, it's very important that they can then learn protocols of a successful web search. As an adult, I had to find my way through it. But we can actually teach students how to be strategic in their search so that they don't scroll around and they waste their time on it. So for example, take them step by step on how to narrow their search and how to use precise keywords. And you can do this so easily by for example, telling them, if we're doing, let's say, deforestation, ask them to just enter the word deforestation in Google and then see how many searches they find. The search engine, how many hundreds of millions of searches, and then try and have a discussion with them. How do we narrow this down? And then therefore telling them to add more specific keywords on it. Tell them to use the quotation marks to find something exactly. Tell them to look, scan, right? Control F is the one that finds the words in a text, whether in a Word document or on a web page. Teach them these things, because that's how you teach research and you get them to be smarter doing research. Equally, how to use appropriate search engines. Most of our learners just go to google.com and that's just about it. But there are others who are child-friendly and deliberately made for our learners. Why not teach them as well? And you have some examples here. And then when they find this information, can't they just look and differentiate? Can we teach them how to differentiate between different types of information? Do our learners know, when they look just at the website address, what does .org or .gov mean? Can they make the difference between these types of websites? Can we teach them so that they understand when they're looking to an official website, when they're looking to another site? And this comes hand in hand with the fact that they need to cross-reference their information. They need to learn and to teach them to triangulate a little bit and look for the same kind of information on different websites that have different purposes. And then they need to evaluate the information. So what you will have noticed now, I don't even talk about deforestation, though this would be my means of teaching it. I would actually look at narrowing down, breaking down what the steps of a good research look like, where actually a search looks like. And then they need to evaluate their information. They need to skim read. Do they know strategies to skim read rather than waste a lot of time going through every single one of them? Can they ask themselves whether the author is credible? Where does the source come from? How about the website? What's the purpose of that website? They need to learn these things, and they need to learn that a website can either have a purpose to sell you something, to educate you on something, to convince you. Is it a blog? Can they identify bias? in a website. I think that's very important skills of important information to teach them. So I'm actually now narrowing down and going into teaching research, not the information in particular. So what do other authors say? How about what do other sites say about the same issue? And it would be quite interesting to then, for example, identify, like an activity, identify bias in a newspaper heading, for example. Boys are better than girls at maths and science. Is there a bias there? Provide them with different. Tourists are rude and obnoxious in Florence. Is this a bias in there? Can you get them to wonderful activities where you can get different newspaper articles and you can get them to identify bias, get them to identify their own bias, give them a topic and allow them to think, reflect and think, where do I stand with this piece of information? What's my preconceived idea about it? That's important. And also the very use of words can skew our reading. In a newspaper heading, murdered versus killed, is already making a difference. So yes, give students 2 links. Which one is true, Alexandra? Thank you very much. And which one is false? There are a lot of ideas. Gather all of them of your students and ask them to collate facts, information, opinion, and then get them to see what was left out of that story. Why was it left out? Sometimes even missing out on information, not informing fully is a kind of bias, isn't it? And our students need to learn this. Imagine the lesson that would be there. Imagine the enthusiasm, all of this, all of them sitting like this on their chairs, listening to whatever. Imagine them finding out, allowing them to explore these curiosities and thinking about the world on themes that are of interest to them. Get your learners to rewrite a newspaper article with all the information. So I'm writing mine and Marta's writing hers and Alexandra's writing hers, and then we can compare. And then I will look at Alexandra's and I could see whether she's got a bias. Get them to write with a different bias. There are so many different activities that you can do with your learners about this. There's a lot of other things, and I'm also aware of time. So at the end, of course, plagiarism. It is important. Even young learners need to know not to take credit for what is theirs. I remember I once taught the importance of sleep to young learners, adolescents, because I think it's important that they know what happens with their brain, and sleep is crucially important in adolescents for the brain to just take all of it. So I remember teaching them that, and I gave them an assignment to collect some information on the importance of sleep. I kid you not, one of them came back with copy-paste from the internet. Tell me it doesn't happen in your lessons. Teach them the importance of plagiarism. Do not accept plagiarism. So it's very important that you discuss ethics and illegality of plagiarisms. Teach them how to reference. There are different referencing systems. Teach them how do they reference correctly. Okay, analysis now. So I'm all full of ideas today. Analysis. Remember, in research also, they need to learn how to ask questions. A very, very easy activity for them to do to explore their curiosities is for them to understand what are the questions. So what, why, when, how, and all of these. So they would then, you would teach them about these questions, because in global perspectives, you teach how to ask questions. It doesn't matter on what, but how to be strategic in your questioning. And then you have this, right? So this is a photograph, like a slow reveal. And this is a PowerPoint, so it's nothing complicated in it. And what you do is you cover it with blocks, and then you slowly reveal the image. And as you do, allow them to ask questions and see how strategic are their questions, how focused, how guided are their questions. Allow them to develop their observation skills. So what do you see? What does this make you think of? Why can you draw that conclusion? And allow them, and as slowly as they will reveal their ideas, there you go. So this is fitting in quite nicely with migration. This is an illegal immigrant trying to cross the border between Mexico and the United States, but that's a lot of the way they can already start on this. But most importantly, not the debate, but actually, how did you get to the debate? How did they learn to ask the questions and to ask focused questions so that they can reach to a solution? What did they use their observational skills? Did they draw the right conclusions? Another strategy, and I've used this, I had to block out my learners' faces out of these photographs, but just to prove you that I'm not speaking from books, I'm speaking from experience. What you have here is, I don't know if you know, patchwork thinking. C.J. Simister is lovely, who introduced to me patchwork thinking first time. So get photographs on the chosen topic, be they endangered species or migration or globalization or whatever it is, and then have a grid. So you have 4 by 4, 16 images, and their task is to arrange them in a grid, just like the ones there, but in such a way so that they can find connections between them. And then they have to explain their connections. They would work independently at the beginning, or they would work in groups, and then they would present their work to others. And you will see that those photographs or concepts would have a different place as they find different connections between them. And they need to express those connections. And if you look here carefully, learners make connections between the issues surrounding, this happens to be globalization. And that's an amazing way to do it. There are different ways in which you can achieve this. Like, for example, the thinking hats of De Bono, right? Another strategy. You have the same class here, and they had a topic of deciding the radio, whether they should have a radio in the school or not. Well, in here, the white hat means you only have to focus on facts and information, nothing else. The red is emotions and feelings and gut instinct. The yellow, the ones who's wearing the yellow hat are the ones who need to look for positives in any situation. Look at the positives. As you know, the black is the negatives. You can find information on anywhere about the bonus thinking hats, and then have them to have a debate so that they can then recommend, but fully aware of everything in the game. So well-informed decisions. And the assessment is different as well, because the global perspectives, we no longer, I mean, we hardly ever do assess summatively. We don't give a grade, we give qualitative feedback. So once we identified somebody needs to get better at asking questions, we need to give them strategies. So it's formative assessment, and you can get your learners based on their learning objectives here. As you walk about in the classroom when they do their activities, as you listen to them communicate, you can then decide on a grid and can say, well, Johnny needs to slow down, Johnny needs to listen more, and then give them feedback and tell them this is what you need to do to progress in this. Of course, there's also a checkpoint, which is a summative assessment at the end of lower secondary, where students have to, if you list them, write an individual research report, but based on a research question that is of global interest, and that's a mark scheme here. And at the end of it, they have a bronze, a silver, or a gold certificate. But again, this is information they can find on the website. I'm going to stop here for some questions. So I'm just going to ask if there are any questions. I'm going to ask if somebody can help me, either Joe or...
Yeah, Mona, yeah, there's more than anything, lots of questions. They've just been asking about, you know, you said that global perspectives, the resources are available for Cambridge International Schools. So we had a couple of questions asking about how they can become an international school and about training. But we had a comment at the end from Sylvie, who was saying you should have information to understand which information is correct and which is not. Otherwise, it might not make as much sense maybe for the students. Have you got any?
Yeah, I think this is important, but most importantly, I think as a teacher of global perspective, you don't impose your view. You try and get the information from learners. So as a teacher of global perspectives, you allow them to explore which information and why, and could there be a different alternative. So I don't find global perspective as didactic in the traditional way as any other subject would be, because it's an exploration. It's about, let's find out, let's see. I'm not here to they're not really, you know, black and white. There's a lot of exploration allowing them to find out the answer for themselves.
there don't seem to be any other questions, but I've got a couple of questions. Which of those skills is your favorite to teach?
I love asking questions, and that's because we do sometimes a game whereby, for example, you stir me up. So there's pieces of paper, right? So they write on a piece of paper one word that's linked with the topic. So let's say we do endangered species, right? And they have to write the word that's linked with endangered species. And then they take the piece of paper with the word, they turn it into a snowball, and we do snowball fights in the middle of summer. So what they do is they chuck it around the classroom, just because it's fun, and then they get one. And when they get their snowball, they open it up, and in the middle it says, I don't know, polar bears. Now what they have to do is they have to get their pen and they have to write a question for which polar bear is the answer. So you need to be strategic in asking questions. And then you do that several times. And then maybe at the end, ask them to get it more complicated and more difficult. Get them to write an answer for which polar bears is the only possible answer.
Okay.
And then there you go.
That's a lovely suggestion. Mona, I'm sorry, we're going to have to wrap it up here, but it has been a wonderful 50 minutes. And I think lots of information, lots of good suggestions on activities, and lots of reflection on those skills as well. So thank you very much for today's session. And for anybody who's interested, you'll be back again tomorrow afternoon at 6:10, looking at global perspectives for older students again. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you so much, Mona.
Thank you so much, and good luck for everybody, and be safe.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.